this is when I was coming through, I had some tough time really coming to terms that I just really didn't believe this because it's been indoctrinated into believing certain things. One of the hardest things to let go of was that hell. There was that constant thing where it's like, if I don't convince myself to believe this, I'm going to be damned in hell because the horror was seemed to be a lot easier to believe than the positive. And there's a lot more in part to do to just human nature of being aware of the threats and you don't really need to describe what a excellent, perfect, comfortable day is, but you really need to be aware of what a horrific day is so you can do anything you can to avoid that horrific day. You know the steps when things come to be horrific. So it makes sense that we pay more attention to the dark things. Then you go into things like Dante writing about the Dante's Inferno, writing about
Circles of
hell,
hell and all that.
the divine comedy, yeah, writing about the stories of how hell is. There's a lot more information. That's even the Bible itself doesn't get that much into hell,
No,
or I think it's mentioned like 7 times or something. Heaven's mentioned a few times, but there's no details. I
no.
remember back when I was still trying to believe, I was asking, what kind of houses do you think? Was it going to be like classical Roman architecture? If somebody was like died before that and believed and only lived in a mud hut, is he all of a sudden going to have electricity? Like, is there going to be internet? What were people thinking? And most people, I don't know if they've actually gone into that mental exercise of trying to imagine what it would be like, let alone the whole aspect that if it's infinite, it's just going to be horrific. Even when back then when I tried to read, I couldn't imagine doing anything infinitely. But anyway, so I was getting to that point, trying to understand, trying to get away from that point. But I was realizing that when I was trying to grow the carbon universe and start thinking this is more about my life, thinking about different religions and trying to get to an understanding before I started going to these academic people going into it, I was trying to think like the animists were just talking about what they were talking about in their locations. As societies were growing, the gods would be in their image, not necessarily just if I'm black, my gods are black, but if we are polygamous, our gods are polygamous. If we're monogamous, our gods have some look favorably upon monogamy. You don't have a monogamous like polygamous culture that all of a sudden like worships a monogamous god.
No.
Like no, the culture becomes monogamous for actual practical reasons of the society before their god starts accepting monogamy. And you just look at the attempt of trying to take trying to take gods that are supportive of monogamy into cultures that have been selected for polygamy. It does
No.
it's not successful.
Well, and like I mentioned in a previous point too about how you think about the Greeks and the Romans glorifying war, but they were the powerful people. The Jews, of course, said the opposite, and then obviously once they gained power, it became Christian soldiers, and in the name of Christ, we're reclaiming this land and all this. But again, it's the same thing of like, okay, if let's say Jesus existed or he was some sort of based off a few people, well, a poor faith healer is not going to lead an army. So naturally, he's not going to be glorified as some sort of warrior hero. Whereas, like, Muhammad was a warlord. So there's things like that, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing they seemed there's a positive to have a god you can visually relate to. It's easier to market and have people
Yeah.
latch on to that visual. But then there's also that negative of the god looks like someone. He looks
Yeah.
like a surfer. He looks like a Caucasian surfer. And then eventually people can be like, what was a Caucasian surfer doing in the Middle East? Like the
Did you
broad-based
ever
Middle East.
did you ever see Agora? Did we talk about that?
Yeah, because Rachel Weisz is in it, and Rachel
Yeah.
Weisz is amazing to look at. She's also a good actress, but she's awesome to look at.
I like one of the earlier scenes when the Christians and the pagans are taunting each other, and one of the Christians goes, "Their gods behave like humans; they eat, drink, and fornicate." And then the guy goes, "If my gods eat, drink, and fornicate, good for them."
The different values of the people,
Yeah,
like they're matched in the actual gods. That
uh,
with the visuals, like if you can't depict Muhammad, then a lot of people can't really get to the point where like Muhammad doesn't look like us because he's just like
yeah,
this kind of being. And they had the point where they say you still have to read in Arabic, even if you don't understand Arabic. There's many Muslims who will only learn it just so they can read that.
yeah.
It's an interesting kind of situation, and that has been a big question mark for a lot of religious people. And that's one of the few things with Christianity that's a very it's one of the things that will I think detonates Christianity that makes it kind of done. Like they establish too much of their mythos on blonde, blue-eyed Mary and surfer Jesus. It's been too core to their marketing that to roll that back now but at the same point the different people why how were did the African like when the colonialists brought that new god to the Africans, I guess they also jumped through. A lot of those Africans were still an animist type of ancestor worship type of thing, so they hadn't gotten to the point of visualizing some kind of supernatural beings that looked like them that were separate. There was no like we were created in the image of this supernatural being, and that was part of why they had to do that because you could not really market that sort of Christianity to Europeans in general. If it was like people would take that literally, we're made in his image, and then you show them an Arab man that's like from the place where you're constantly at war with, like then they're going to be like, hey, we can't really buy that. So in order to make it more palatable for their predominantly European masses, like they had to have somebody that looked like them for them people to relate to. And then by doing that, they've kind of painted themselves into many corners with the whole situation where it's like, right now people are like, no, he didn't look like that. So it's a tough situation to get into.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen Asian Jesuses as well, or GZI. I don't know the
Yeah,
grammatically.
I've seen Asian Jesus, I've seen Black Jesus, I've seen Indian Jesus. And that's the thing. I'm kind of wondering, like, what is God? Like, is God like some kind of hermaphroditic, omniracial type of being? Like, because are women made in His image, or is women a different being? Like, this is the kind of thing. It's weird though. That's what I'm saying. New stories, and this is a question that I've asked people. Even from the little that we know about the universe, why would anyone think that? And maybe because it's the only life form that we know, so maybe the only way sentient life can exist is in a bipedal form because that's all we kind of know right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can already imagine many different better forms to be able to exist in the universe that we know of. Being metallic, having multiple arms, having the ability to communicate over like Wi-Fi, which is essentially telepathy, like telekinesis. Like there's other things we can think of that we're already able to kind of achieve through machines. We're already able to create entities, beings that can exist in places the human body can't exist on Earth. So why would people think that a God that can exist in the universe would be in a form that can only exist on a very limited part of this single planet? Like
Yeah.
And I'm saying if I can think of this, there's at least 100 million other people that can think of this rather easily. Probably more. There's at least billions of people that can. Surely there's billions of people that can think about this. So I'm thinking it's like, even if you want to believe in God, we need new gods. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.